There's a quiet pattern that runs through more lives than most people are willing to admit. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It doesn't always involve chaos, heartbreak, or obvious dysfunction. Sometimes it looks like staying where you are, choosing what you've always chosen, returning to people who've already shown you who they are, and, well, calling it just the way things are. But underneath that pattern is something far more revealing. You are not always choosing what is good for you. You are choosing what feels familiar to your nervous system. And familiarity, even when it's painful, feels safe. That's the part most people never confront, because it forces a difficult question. If peace is what you say you want, why do you keep choosing what hurts? This isn't about weakness. It's not about a lack of discipline or intelligence. It's about conditioning. It's about how your mind and body learn to define safety long before you had the awareness to question it. So, if you've ever found yourself going back to the same type of relationship, repeating the same emotional cycles, or feeling uncomfortable when things are actually calm and stable, this isn't random. It's patterned. And once you understand the pattern, you can start breaking it. Your nervous system is wired for familiarity, not happiness. One of the biggest misconceptions people carry is that they are naturally driven toward happiness. They're not. They're driven toward what is known. Your nervous system doesn't evaluate your life based on what's objectively healthy. It evaluates based on what it recognizes. If chaos, inconsistency, emotional distance or instability were part of your early experiences, your system learned to associate those states with normal. That means peace, stability and emotional safety can actually feel foreign. And what feels foreign often feels, well, unsafe. This is why someone can leave a toxic situation and then feel restless in a healthy one. It's why calm can feel boring. It's why consistency can feel suspicious. It's not that peace is wrong. It's that your system hasn't learned how to trust it yet. A practical way to start working with this is to notice your reactions to calm moments. When things are stable, do you relax, or do you start looking for what's wrong? That impulse to search for problems is often your system trying to return to what it understands. Instead of acting on it, just sit with it. Let the calm exist without trying to disrupt it. That's how you begin retraining your sense of safety. Familiar pain gives you a sense of control, even when it hurts. Pain that you recognize is predictable. And you know predictability creates the illusion of control. If you've been in situations where you were criticized, ignored, or undervalued, you learn how to navigate those environments. You know what to expect. You know how to respond. There's a twisted kind of comfort in that predictability. Unknown peace, on the other hand, removes that script. It asks you to trust something you don't fully understand yet, and that lack of control can feel more threatening than the pain you already know how to handle. This is why people often stay in situations that clearly aren't good for them. Not because they enjoy the pain, but because they understand it. To shift this, you have to redefine what control actually means. Control isn't predicting someone else's behavior. It's trusting your ability to respond to whatever happens. You build that trust slowly, by making small decisions that prioritize your well-being, even when they feel unfamiliar. By choosing to walk away when something doesn't feel right, even if part of you wants to stay because it's comfortable. Each time you do that, you weaken the hold of familiar pain. You don't just remember your past, you relive it through your patterns. Your past doesn't stay in the past. It shows up in your present decisions, your emotional reactions, and your relationship dynamics. If you experienced inconsistency, you may find yourself drawn to people who are unpredictable. If you felt like you had to earn love, you may overextend yourself trying to prove your worth. These aren't conscious choices, they're reenactments. There's a part of you that is trying to resolve what was never fully processed. And it does that by recreating similar situations, hoping for a different outcome. But the outcome rarely changes until your awareness does. A practical step here is to identify recurring themes in your life, not just in relationships, but in how you feel. Do you often feel unappreciated, overlooked, not enough? Trace that feeling back. When was the first time you remember feeling that way? You're not doing this to stay stuck in the past. You're doing it to understand the root of the pattern. Because once you see it clearly, it becomes harder for it to operate unconsciously. Peace requires you to let go of who you had to be to survive. This is where things get deeper. Because choosing peace isn't just about changing your environment. It's about changing your identity. The version of you that learned to navigate familiar pain developed certain traits to survive. Maybe you became, hyper-aware of others' emotions. Maybe you learned to minimize your needs. Or perhaps you became independent to the point of isolation. Those traits served a purpose. They protected you. But they may not serve you anymore, and letting them go can feel a bit like losing a part of yourself, even if that part is tied to pain. This is why growth often feels like grief. You're not just moving forward, you're shedding layers of who you had to be. To navigate this, you need to acknowledge the role those traits played. Instead of judging yourself for them, recognize their purpose. Then ask yourself whether they are still necessary. That question, it opens the door to change. You may be unconsciously addicted to emotional intensity. Calm doesn't just feel unfamiliar, it can feel empty. If your emotional baseline has been shaped by highs and lows, your system may equate intensity with aliveness. That means stable, peaceful situations can feel flat by comparison. This is where people confuse peace with boredom. They leave healthy environments not because something is wrong, but because something feels missing. And what feels missing is the emotional spike they've grown used to. The key here is learning to redefine what fulfillment feels like. Instead of chasing intensity, start paying attention to consistency, to how you feel over time, rather than in isolated moments. Ask yourself, does this situation bring me stability, clarity, and respect? Or does it bring me uncertainty and emotional swings? The answer may not feel exciting in the moment, but it tells you everything you need to know. You know, your fear of the unknown is often stronger than your desire for something better. Change, well, it requires stepping into uncertainty. And, yeah, uncertainty triggers fear. Even if your current situation isn't ideal, it's known. You understand it. You've adapted to it. The unknown doesn't offer that comfort. It asks you to move without guarantees. This is where, honestly, many people stay stuck. Not because they don't want something better, but because they fear what they might lose in the process. To move through this, you need to shift your perspective on fear. Instead of seeing it as a stop sign, start seeing it as a signal. Fear often points to areas where growth is possible. When you feel resistance to something that could improve your life, don't immediately interpret that resistance as a reason to stop. Question it. Ask yourself, is this fear protecting me, or is it keeping me in a pattern? That distinction really changes how you respond. You know, learning to sit in peace is actually a skill, not some kind of default state. Peace isn't something you just arrive at and instantly feel comfortable in. It's, well, something you learn. Just like your system learned to adapt to familiar pain, it can also learn to adapt to stability. But that does require practice. It means choosing not to create problems where there really aren't any. It means resisting the urge to return to what's familiar just because it feels comfortable. And it means staying present even when your mind tries to pull you back into those old patterns. One way to build this skill is by becoming aware of your impulses. So when you feel the urge to reach out to someone who hasn't treated you well, just pause. When you feel the urge to overanalyze a calm situation, pause again. You don't have to act on every single feeling. That space between feeling and action, well, that's where real change happens. Choosing peace is less about finding something new and more about becoming someone new. At its core, this shift isn't external. It's internal. You're not just changing what you choose, you're changing how you choose. You're moving from reacting based on familiarity to responding based on awareness. That doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, one that involves setbacks, discomfort, and, moments where the old patterns feel easier. But each time you choose differently, you reinforce a new direction. Each time you sit with peace, instead of running from it, you expand your capacity for it. And eventually, what once felt unfamiliar starts to feel normal. That's when the shift becomes real. Not when your life looks different on the outside, but when your internal response to it changes. If this kind of depth and honesty is what you're here for, then you already know this isn't surface-level work. It's the kind of work that changes how you experience everything. So, if you're serious about breaking these patterns and stepping into something more stable, more grounded and more real, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because, most people stay stuck in what they know, and very few are willing to do what it takes to choose something better.